Yeah, you are.
Okay. All right. Well, let's first get this meeting started of the Measure J Commission, and today's date is August 3rd, 2020. Chantel, welcome to the group.
Thank you.
And I will let you take roll call real quickly.
Commissioner Bernstein,
Here.
Commissioner Federer,
Present.
Gray, David Gray,
He's absent.
Francis LaBranche. He's not going to make it. I knew that. Dan Lass,
I'm here.
Brian Robin,
Present.
Naomi Soto,
Present.
Vice Chair Sid Craig,
Present.
and Chair Jim Gazan.
Here. Well, thank you. Do we stand to do we do the Pledge of Allegiance for Zoom meetings?
Yes.
I even have a flag. So we'll do it to be respectful. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to our republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The flag is a nice top.
Thank you, everybody. I don't have the agenda in front of me because I wasn't able to print it, but I believe it's comments from me, and we're going to get right into this. I'm actually flying back to Palm Springs in a little bit, so for those of you that are at work or busy, you're in luck. We're going to keep this to about an hour or less. Why we did this meeting is you might have gotten a letter that Chantel had sent, and back at the beginning of the pandemic, and I would say collectively, Jeffrey and Sid and I, who were on the Downtown Park Subcommittee, got together with the Measure J Subcommittee of Parks and Rec, and we just wanted to basically kind of do a nice thing to at least take the pressure off of council that we were okay if Measure J dollars weren't all spent on the downtown park. We knew that the construction had started, but with city budgets just hemorrhaging and tens of millions of dollars, you know, we were in the hole almost immediately. And we just offered that. Parks and Rec had some opinions as well, but we had offered up that letter. In the meantime, the budget is fairly strained. And if you have any questions for Nancy, she's here to answer that. But basically, David Reddy pulled $3 million from the park, downtown park, and put it back into general fund to basically help out with other needs. Our biggest fear is we wanted to see less programs. You know, our feeling as far as Jeffrey, Sid, and myself was we'd rather see programs stay in place. We'd rather see things that are a greater need to the community than a park that we've never even had, was kind of our thought. And we were just kind of giving council like, look, we're not going to be disappointed if this doesn't happen right away, or if council decides to do a lesser park to save money, and that money can be put towards other projects. So it's been kind of an ongoing discussion and debate amongst council. There's some strong feelings for the downtown park to continue, although there's really probably not budget for it. Nancy will know final numbers out of 2019-2020 budget later this month. And once that's determined, they'll see if they have extra money to put back into Measure J and into capital projects. The goal of this quick meeting was just to get a vote, your temperature, your take from a commission wide. We didn't want to be just the only three with a voice, and get your priorities as far as how you feel this money should get directed. What council will be looking at is either moving forward with the park as designed. That park now is at a budget of around $9 million. So from its early projections of being a $5 million park when Rios first was contracted, to this date, we're looking at about 9 million. There were some oversights, some structural issues with the parking garage, and I don't know, costs went up. The money is budgeted if we were in not this situation. The money would somewhat be there between Quimby funds and taking from Measure J. Then the other option is for council to consider is opening the park and just putting DG down, finish the restrooms, finish the police substation, whether the interior is finished or not, but get the structures complete, get the restrooms working and operational, lay down some decomposed granite, put a few benches, call it a day, and it's a placeholder for council later on to use monies when we have monies, and it will probably be a year or two, to finish the park as designed. There could be an option that they change the design of the park, and I don't know if that will happen. We hope that we would be invited to the table to discuss that if that was an option. Then we have what we approved back in 2019 with our joint Measure J City Council meeting. The biggest item on that list was the renovation of all park restrooms and get them up to ADA requirements. That job for now has been kind of slated as canceled. And I believe what that means, Nancy, you can correct me, is they don't have the money for everything that was approved back in May of 2019. It's still projects that are approved and need to be done. So again, as a commission, we could say, hey, we would like to see, if Measure J monies are found, we would like to see commitment to the things that were previously agreed upon between our commission and the council. There wasn't really a lot else park-wise in that. We had some a lighting program, and I don't know all what staff sent to you. Then we also had the short list of items that were presented to us from the Parks and Rec Commission that we approved back in December. Again, I don't know if you have that list, but it was items such as new gym floor for Jesse, James O. Jesse, air conditioning for the Demuth Center, because they don't have air conditioning currently. Curtains for the pavilion, we had kind of a conversation about that. I think an important issue were shade structures for play lots in the parks. Right now, we're the only city in the valley that doesn't have those shade structures over playground equipment. Some added benches. We talked about a passenger van. There were other issues. Those are still facing council. Right now, those aren't budgeted. Council did pass in January of 2020 quite a few items, and I don't know if that again was in one of your reports sent to you, but they did approve a roughly 2.3 million in park issues. So replacing carpet at the Demuth Center, replacing the windows at the Demuth Center, and then a few various items at Sunrise Plaza Park where they needed, again, new air conditioning for the pavilion, window replacement for the leisure center. The list goes on. And again, these were approved by council, right now aren't budgeted because of the situation we're in.
Jim, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So am I correct that the money that was transferred out of Measure J to the general fund, if we have extra, maybe Nancy can answer, if we have extra funds, it goes back to Measure J, but has to be used for parks?
I don't think it has to be used for parks. Quite a bit of it was scooped out, so Marcus is here if he wants to talk about anything. But I don't think it has to be.
I was under the impression at the last council meeting that the 3 million was, or maybe it might be 2 council meetings ago, the 3 million was agreed that if it's not needed in the general fund, or no, that it would go to another parks project, and that it was up to Measure J and Parks and Rec to determine which of those, like what were the other projects that would be priorities if it wasn't going to the downtown park.
That was my understanding.
Yes, correct. So that was the understanding. Again, some people may want to see it go to all downtown. Others, let's maybe put a little towards downtown and finish projects that were already approved. Another park project that council this Thursday may consider is they did get a matching grant for a dog park in Demuth Park. So it would be very close to where the animal shelter is. The grant is, I believe, for 1.5 million. And then the city has, if we accept that grant, which is great, it's free money. The only thing is we have to come up as a city with 1.5 million to match. And that park has roughly been, I saw it somewhere in notes, I think it's been budgeted at about $3.2 million. Again, some discussions that maybe that could come through private funding, fundraising campaign, etc. But again, something else for all of you to consider. So I'm going to open it up. If you have any questions, I hope that I kind of got things, hopefully it's somewhat clear. And we don't really need to get into the weeds exactly what projects. I think it's more, do we put all the money to downtown, some money to downtown, and then any money remaining to park commitments that were already agreed upon by council, that were already voted and approved. And I'm willing to open it up to your opinions or questions.
Jim, Stan, first of all, thanks for having this meeting. I mean, for those of us who aren't on those small committees, it's good to get a little bit of an update about what's going on. The short list that you mentioned of park projects that I think totaled about 925 that have been approved by council. So is that likely that those are going ahead with the park, with the shade structures and replacing the gym at James or Jesse? Is that, you said they were approved, but is that likely to happen? Do we have any idea?
They're probably not likely to happen anytime soon because the money is not there unless they decide with found money to put it into that. So that's kind of our role today, is to give a recommendation that we would like to see if there's found money or money that's left over in the general fund that goes back to Measure J and it's kind of slated for parks. Where do we want to see that money go? What does our commission, this is Measure J money, where do we want to see, what capital projects would we feel are more important? Is it, $1.6 million to go to renovation of all restrooms in our current parks? Would it be that 900,000 figure that council approved back in January? There was also talk of, I know staff was looking at costs for, and again, what they approved actually in January totaled 2.3. So we're looking at, over $3 million in projects easily. And that doesn't even get started into the areas of creating an actual bathrooms at James O. Jesse, which don't even exist right now. Again, that was on somewhat of a short list, but I don't believe was approved by council yet. These were all things that Parks and Rec were kind of looking at for community project money. Jeffrey.
Just to clarify, the new restrooms at James O. Jesse are part of that 925,000.
They are?
Yes.
Yeah, it's item 8.
Okay.
It's item 8. It's the bulk. That.
Oh, there they are. Yep. I'm sorry. You're correct.
And I guess as a follow-up question to that, I mean, one of the things that did kind of survive in the reported budget were the community projects, the $1 million for community projects. Remind me if anybody remembers, where are we with that? What part of that money has been committed?
I believe we just wrapped up hotspots, and basically we were moving on to parks. And it's not spoken for because the money is just, basically it's not there. That was part, all of Measure J money, including community projects, has been sort of rolled into general fund right now to try to keep, things operational.
Actually,
So,
in the report that was sent out, Chantel sent out in June, there was still $1 million for community projects for 2021. Oh no, now it's been revised out of the new budget. Sorry, it's been corrected.
okay, so it's gone.
So the 2019, 2020 community, that's already committed, I presume.
Yeah, that was the hotspots.
That was the hotspots. Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, if I can, I think that it's a meaningful question generally of how we would prioritize if we had something, but not knowing how big of a pot we might possibly be able to segment and then recommend. It's almost an artifice here to speak of priorities when we don't know if the number is 1 or 1,000.
Well, and I think it was more, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
If instead what that really gels down to is we should simply be trying to prioritize on a list without having a sense of magnitude. It's a frustrating idea to get specific to when it, by its nature, it's just so fundamentally vague.
Right.
But that said, since I just have a moment to add to here, I have a thought to add to here, to your probably your first point, Jim, of the question of the downtown park, to the extent that we're taking a soft poll here, I would think that it makes really good sense to make the downtown location a safe and usable surface, and not leaving it in construction terms, leaving it as a pit, so that it becomes a safety question that's separate and apart from having any usability. I'd rather see us put some funds into it as a body, as a city, to complete the subgrade work, get a safe surface, and leave it as something that does not have to literally be policed 24/7 to make sure nobody gets hurt.
Nancy,
Yeah, I think,
is there any idea how much money the extra might come back of the 3 million?
You know what? I'm really not sure. We're working on the numbers currently, so we can update the city council, give them some type of update on Thursday.
If
and just to
commission,
let,
if the commission wants to review the staff report that's being presented on the 6th, I believe it's online and readily accessible. It does go through the alternatives, and it does kind of mention how much funds are being spent in each alternative. So it's a good read if you want to get some information on what's being proposed for the downtown park.
Are you able to get any highlights now?
yeah, Joel, is that Joel? And if that is Joel, can you tell us just roughly what some of those alternatives for the downtown park would cost to get it just to a flat surface that's safe and usable?
I can. Let me see. Let me scroll down. I'm actually looking at the staff report right now too. So to get it, if we abandon it right now and stop and do some work around the police substation, we're looking at about total cost up, because there's money that already spent. It's better for the commission to actually read the staff report. Together, the total cost, if we stop work right now and just secure our restroom and build a structure and repair the damage to the parking garage, we're looking at about 4.4 million. And then from there, it goes on to different alternatives. The very most basic alternative, let me see, is so it's option 3. And the cost for option 3 is, let me see, 5.6 million. So in order to do the actual staff report justice, it's better for each commissioner to kind of take your time and read through it. But it
So
really,
what agenda item is this on Thursday's meeting?
it is agenda item, it's unfinished business.
John just put it in the chat.
4A.
4A.
All right. Okay, great. Thanks.
So Joel, these figures though, some of these millions have already been spent, correct? This is some of it is, right. So basically in the 5.6 million figure, is that just putting DG across the lot, doing very minimal?
That is correct. Yeah, and of that, about 2.6 has already been spent.
And what would it take to get to, how much money would it take to get to that 5.6 million figure? Obviously like 3 million or so has already been spent. I know we have those garage repairs.
Yeah, so for that particular option where it's only very minimal landscaping or not at all, it's just with DG, 2.6 has already been spent to date. About 1.1, let me see, would be to do the finish the restroom. Some of that money has already been spent as well. And then about 750,000 to do the groundscaping, just deep.
Okay. And for the rest of the commission, that was something we had kind of promoted to council as well, that we would prefer, at least from our subcommittee, to see something just done as a placeholder, and it's safe and it's open. The bathrooms would be operational, which would be wonderful to have. And it would be a great site for festivals or whatever in the meantime. It gives Modernism a home, it gives the film festival a home, farmers markets, whatever, until monies are available to either move forward with the current design or a different design. One thing to keep in mind too, and again, I don't think there'll be the monies to finish that park as designed right now. And I'm a little skeptical that we could even afford to maintain that park as designed right now with a 50% cut to our landscape services for the entire city. You're talking a park that's going to have hundreds and hundreds of plants. Some aren't going to make it. Some, there's just going to be a lot of issues that could come up. And with a real shoestring budget as far as maintenance, we could be throwing a lot of good money at bad.
I just
so,
have
and go ahead.
process questions. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
When was this letter sent to council?
This was back in the beginning of May when they were first discussing budgets.
Yeah. So I think this is a super important conversation. I'm a little confused as to why we're having this full commission conversation after all these conversations have already happened with council on budget. I know I got questions that there was a Measure J letter about the direction of the downtown park, and I knew nothing about it. And so I think this is like a very crazy time, and I think this conversation could have been more comprehensive if we had it a few months ago, because there's a lot of questions from community about what Measure J is funding and what we're supporting with all these changes in the city budget changes. So that's kind of my first point. Some other kind of things that have come up around just kind of our options and moving forward. I think it does make sense to like reevaluate what we're willing to put money to. Some immediate thoughts are $4 million for essentially a second police station, and gravel seems like a project for the police, not necessarily a project for community members. And that was how we were trying to envision this park, as a place for tourists and families to go downtown. So I would like it to seem a little bit more than just like the bare bones option of an operational substation and bathrooms. And then lastly, I would say, while it is a really precarious time with the council budget, Measure J funds are for capital infrastructure projects. And it's really important that we remember that that was what the voters voted on. That's what we're going to be held accountable when we have to vote on Measure J again. And to say that I feel uncomfortable personally saying City Council is welcome to move Measure J monies to programming, because that wasn't the purpose of Measure J funds to begin with. So there are large parts of the budget in other places in the city that is not getting looked at as proportionately. And I think we need, as a commission, be really mindful of the purpose of Measure J and making sure that we're holding true to that. So I'm all for reconsidering all these options, and I'm really glad the staff report for Thursday has so many options for them to really review. I think that's a great starting point. I think those earlier conversations were really hard when we didn't know what we could really, how we could revamp the downtown park. But I feel really strongly that it should be on our park options, and even with the other kind of hotspots or smaller projects that we have in the queue for Parks and Rec, as much as possible, going to infrastructure and long-term investments, whether it's downtown or other parts.
Great, thank you. Jeffrey? Then Sid.
I do tend to agree that just having a $4 million police station with nothing there does not make any sense. And that, you know, it would be ideally we have something to use sooner rather than later. You know, part of the Measure J was infrastructure, it was community projects and downtown revitalization. So, you know, in a different world, if we had, you know, lots of money and we could have this great park that everybody went to, I think that would have been wonderful. I think since times have changed a bit, I think a lot of people would want to see community development in the parks. And I don't think it's just programming. I agree that that doesn't make sense, but there are, you know, long-term infrastructure like bathrooms, which I think really matter. You know, with James O'Jesse does not have, and they've had a tough time lately, does not have any outdoor bathroom on the weekends. In terms of downtown revitalization, I know this is not, they are not the major players. The business community has all written to City Council in favor of a finished but scaled down version. So they also don't want it to be a police station, but they would rather save the money with a scaled down version. And this came from Main Street Chamber of Commerce and the Hospitality Association. So it does seem to me like, you know, if it were my input, I would agree with Naomi. We can't just have a $4 million police station with gravel or a closed fence. It has to be, I would prefer personally some kind of an open, you know, a lawn or groundscaping that we could use. The other thing, just my last point, was that, you know, as part of the business community, we're trying to figure out places to do socially distant events, which is getting very difficult. It's very expensive, apparently, to shut down Palm Canyon, although that's been in discussion. But to have a space where you could potentially do socially distanced markets or concerts or art fairs or something like that, obviously, you know, safe, would be a requirement. It seems like that would be a great thing for downtown for both the business, tourists, and community. Thank you.
So Sid, go ahead.
I was just going to say, first of all, Naomi, I agree with much of what you're saying. But I think since we have Nancy on the line, and I think Marcus is on the line as well, it would also be useful, even though it's several months old now, I think most people on the commission really haven't gotten a very good update as to how we arrived at these budgets, which were just sent to us. I mean, what was the process? What was the discussion? Since we weren't part of it, I think it would be useful to review that.
And can I add to that? The same
Sure.
question, but a tag along. I'm sure city attorney has answered this question, but it's never come to us as a body. And Naomi described it, which is, can you answer the question, what was the legal mechanism that enables city council to claw back and divert Measure J funds for general funds, given the purpose, and I imagine it's in the bond prospectus, of the purpose of those funds and that issuance to begin with? I'm sure there's a concise answer. We've never heard it. And it would be helpful, I think, for all of us, given the seriousness that we bring our position as commissioners, be helpful to hear that simple response so that we can understand how we got here technically. And then, of course, going forward on a more practical level, it would be helpful to receive a specific overview or a specific description of what funds remain intact for projects where the funding is authorized and secure, and if there are any funds that have been authorized but haven't been programmed that add to that, if in fact there might be any.
Sid. Oh, Sid, you have to unmute. It's
If Don or Joel or Marcus could respond to this. There was a time when they were going over the budgets of the park, and the company that was going to be doing the design were having meetings with us, and we saw the price going up and the water treatments, etc. And at the time, Michael Braun had said that he would be happy at his costs, if I'm right, to just put grass down in the sprinkler system for the time being, for us to have if we didn't want to maintain or move ahead with those expenses. This is pre the virus. What happened with that? I'm asking if Marcus or Joel or Joel or Don can answer, or if they remember what went on with that.
Sid, I think that time period, and I don't want to get totally into Meyer Down in the downtown park, but the park had an approved plan by council. I don't know if they had a final vote on it, but it was definitely approved. It had input by the public in 4 different meetings back in 2015. This was a 2014-15 plan, and I believe that's about the time frame where Westman was still in charge, and he and Michael had committed to doing grass as a placeholder while they hammered out the details of the design. At that time, the park budget was $5 million. It did creep up to about 6.3 million. And then we had the 2015 council election. So council members had changed. The original plan, I don't know if I forwarded it to everybody, but it's in documents, and it was a very specific plan for it to be an entertainment venue. And the public had weighed in, and the biggest component that the public had weighed in on is flexibility for all kinds of events. They wanted it to be able to function for a farmer's market, but also have a concert that 3,000 to 5,000 people could attend. So it was pretty broad, but the public had weighed in at that time and wanted open space. Then with the new council in 2015, I think people looked at that plan and they said, let's try to do better. And let's get a different architect involved. It went out to bid. It now became a Mark Rios Clemente project. They presented 3 designs. One of those designs was similar to the original entertainment design. That design actually got the most votes. The runner-up to that design is the design that we see currently for this plan, for this park. And at that time, Rios was working with what he thought would be a $5 million budget. Obviously, We're not at that $5 million mark anymore. It's going to cost more than that just now to do something extremely simple. And that's a sad fact of this. You know, it's unfortunate that the project got derailed after the 2014-15 council. The completion date was supposed to be September, October of 2017. We would already have a park, and it was quite beautiful. It had big grassy areas. It had landscaping. They had a place for Maryland, whether you like her or not. They had a beautiful amphitheater design that was going to have sound and electricity and lighting. The new park doesn't even have that. It's just a simple little platform with a shade structure. So it's definitely different. It's just the way that it is. And unfortunately, we're still looking at a pile of dirt. We don't want to look at a pile of dirt any longer. But I don't think that we probably don't have the budget to complete the park as is right now. And do we do that at the sake of also ignoring all the other park needs that have been ignored for years? Parks and Rec has not been given love for a long time. And all of our community projects keep getting, you know, rolled into hotspots, and they've been patiently waiting. And council's approved a lot of these upgrades to our current city parks. So with that, again, we were just looking to take the commission's temperature, and I'm sorry that we haven't communicated sooner. I was traveling in June, and we actually just thought this was settled with council. I don't always see the meetings, and so everything's just weird now because it's all virtual, and we just thought the budgets were settled. So we were alerted a good week ago that this was resurfacing again, and that it wasn't settled. And we thought it was appropriate to get together as a commission and see if we wanted to make a recommendation. And I realize it's vague. We don't know what the monies are that are going to be available, but we could, as a commission, and I kind of sense this temperature, that we would like to see things that have been approved be a priority. And maybe it is a nice park downtown, but not exactly what's designed, and put money towards that to do something that makes it functional and look nice. And it still can be somewhat of a placeholder for down the road when budgets maybe get back to normal in 2022. But we'd also like to see the restroom renovations, or, you know, whatever else on the list, or we can just say we want to see council definitely give to other projects that are outside of just the downtown park. No one's really brought up the dog park issue in Demuth. We maybe don't need to muddy the waters with that. That can be up to council, I guess, to see how they can handle that. Obviously, it's wonderful to be given a grant, but it's also tough for the city to find 1.5 million to match that. Have I said anything out of turn?
That's about right. I was wondering if we could hear from Marcus about Brian and Dan's question on just kind of the process of this summer in terms of all the back and forth and delays of council determining the budget and this 3 million.
Okay, well, I'll back up. So in the staff report that I wrote on June 11th, it was a comprehensive discussion of all the various funds, including the Measure J fund. And so what's important to note is that the Measure J itself is a general tax. So as a general tax, it goes right into the general fund, and then we transfer that into a separate fund. The text, I included it, I cut and paste the text of what Measure J actually was. And you can read it for yourself, but it was not limited to capital projects. It's a general tax, so legally it can be used by the city council for any purpose it deems necessary, including salaries. Now, it certainly endeavored to, and has since it was enacted, allocated Measure J to program or to capital projects. And, you know, in this extraordinary time that we're in, and they adopted a fiscal emergency, they had to take that step and transfer Measure J into the general fund to keep the fund reserve solvent. So I'm not an attorney, but that's to answer the question of how they were able to do that. And then so council, in order to adopt the budget, the meeting that we had on June 30th, they ultimately decided by a vote of 3-2 to direct us to revise the design of the downtown park to basically create 3 million in savings. And that 3 million then gets transferred to the general fund restricted reserve for pensions. So that's where that $3 million sits. So it's not a pot of money that's available for parks projects or other Measure J projects. So what we will be discussing with council on Thursday night when we finalize our closeout of the fiscal year is, to the extent there's additional revenues, what does council want to do with those revenues? And how does that affect how we move forward with the downtown park? I do just want to point for the record, there was extensive public process in the review of this design for the downtown park. There were multiple public workshops at the convention center. There was over almost 1,400 online responses and comments regarding how to develop the design of the downtown park. And then there was a formal committee that was made up of 2 members of like 5 commissions, including Measure J, the Parks and Rec, let's see. There were 2 members of council, 2 members from AAC, 2 members from the Measure J Commission, 2 members from the Parks and Rec Commission, 2 members from the Planning Commission, and 2 members from the Public Arts Commission. And there were a series of public meetings, including a joint meeting of AAC and Planning Commission. So there was extensive public review of the design of the park that was ultimately, approved by council and then is what's in construction. The challenge we have is council basically is directing us to figure out some options that are strategic, because we certainly don't want to spend $1 million to put down DG or turf if we come back later and build some portion or some part or all of the original design. We don't want to throw money away, but the challenge is, any we look at this, and as we noted in the staff report for Thursday, it's difficult to do that. It's difficult to do this in a strategic way if we don't actually implement what was approved and is under construction. So we're really going to look for council guidance on Thursday. The other challenge is that we're really in uncharted territory because we're in the middle of a awarded contract. And we have to negotiate with the contractor any changes to the plan, any changes to the scope of the work. We have to basically, we're at a disadvantage when we have to negotiate with a contractor in an active contract and try to get credit for work deleted, and then negotiate pricing for new construction. So it's a challenge, and we're trying to make sure that whatever direction we go, we're going to realize the savings that everyone wants. And that's why if you look at the staff report, we identified option 1, which is essentially just stop where we're at. Fence it off, keep it secure, and let's refigure out what direction we want to go in, what's the interim or new design, and then we just basically come up with a design and rebid it with a new contractor. Because as I said, it's a little bit of a challenge to try to do this midstream in an active contract.
Marcus, quick question. So the 3 million that is being pulled from Measure J that needs to go to the reserves, that is kind of been determined, right? Like that threshold needs to stay in the reserve. So the money that's coming back possibly to Measure J, those are from kind of miscellaneous savings that have been identified or other projects that don't move forward? Or I'm just kind of, I think we were talking about as if some of that original 3 million comes back, but what we're thinking, it's actually separate monies that potentially could come back for parks projects, correct? Not the original 3 million that needs to stay in the reserves that made it possible to have
Yeah,
that
so we're under this rolling budget model. So when we evaluate how revenues are coming in and expenditures are going out, because it's difficult to predict, with COVID, what's going to happen now or 2 months from now. But the idea was that if we have additional revenue that comes in over what we projected, that's when council will reconsider where that revenue goes. Some on council want to perhaps bring staff back that were laid off, or add funding for different programs and projects. And certainly parks projects is a priority, I think, for all of us. It was unfortunate to have to cancel all those important projects that we were starting to work on with Demuth and the ADA improvements. And, we're still working on some of the restroom projects because those are funded with CDBG. So that will have a lot of the discussion on Thursday night, to the extent there's revenues that they can redistribute. That's where that money would come from.
Great, thanks.
Jeffrey?
So, I just want to give my personal opinion, and we can see where everyone else stands. I understand that there was a lot of public input onto the original park design, and a lot of, not everybody wanted it, but a lot of people did want it, and there was different options. But I think we have to recognize that there's been a drastic change, and I think it is, unfortunately, we did try to do a survey at this point, but it wasn't well formatted, to rely on what people had said at that time, because there was lots of things that were not under discussion. We didn't have police losing staff. We didn't not fill police positions. We had assumptions that these other things would happen. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but my understanding is, 80 something city staff is not being hired. And there's lots of other things that are being, delayed or postponed. And quite honestly, we don't know how much longer this is going to go on. And, back when they had the original complete, my vote would be to have a completed scaled down version of the downtown park. And I think that was in the original part of that staff memo, it's option 2. I know that's what the business community wants, not that, they're deciding everything, but I think there is a concern, and I will tell you that the revenue that will come in over the next year will be significantly down. I think from my read is that there will be no major events or tourism for the next maybe year. It's unsure about the convention center because that is still in phase 4. So I think, but to be able to have this, I realize it's difficult, and I don't know how it's even possible to renegotiate a contract, but if we can have a completed scaled down version of a downtown park, it would be, I think that would be great for the community. I think it would be great for tourists. It would be great for the business. It is not the original plan that people, wanted, but we don't have the luxury of doing that. And I'm afraid of waiting another 5 years to have that park. So that's my.
Yeah, I want to note too, for clarification, because I looked at the staff report, the majority of the people voted for the more open plan of those 3 park ideas. That is not what's being delivered. It's more like they combined the votes of the other 2 options and said, okay, this is the majority of who didn't vote for the one option that had the most votes. And I was at those planning sessions at the convention center, and it was constantly talked about that this was a $5 million project. That's what I remember. I was there, I saw the plans, and we voted. And and yes, we were part of that subcommittee, although I think a lot of those members, all those commissions got on board very late in the process. I know we were, so was Parks and Rec. to some degree. The design was determined. We really didn't have much of a say. So that just was the reality of it. So Marcus, I mean, does our opinion matter here to council? It seems like a lot's made up, and you know, I'm just curious, what weight do we have in even weighing in on this? I mean, obviously we can make a recommendation, but are we just spinning our wheels at this point?
No, of course, what you say matters. So if you want to give direction to us or communicate in any way you want to the council, you should. Absolutely. Like I said, council wanted to be strategic and not throw away money. And it seems that there was still consensus on the council that they wanted to complete the downtown park. So however we go finish this in either phases or an interim approach, we don't want to end up having to rip everything up.
Right. Well, I think
so that's the challenge.
I think we want to be fiscally responsible too as a commission, and we get it. It's a conundrum that we're in, and I think it's kind of conventional wisdom that the money's not there to finish the full-on park and have it open as designed, you know, early in 2021. We also get it that, yeah, if you put in irrigation and sod that lot, well, then you're looking at an expense of tearing all of that out when you are ready to put the park in. So now we're making this park even more expensive. It's a difficult situation. It's obviously not ideal, and I think council probably wants to do something that's as minimal as possible to save money, and then keep it open for redirection down the road, and to make it a really great public space down the road when the monies are there. And that's kind of what I wanted to get a feel from our commission. Do we support that? And then if there is money beyond that, should it go towards the other park projects? It seems like, I haven't heard from Linda, but it seems that, you know, and in the meantime, everyone's suffering. The library, you know, programs, the swim center, there's all these other things that, you know, are not getting funded. And I think kind of the point of our subcommittee when we address council on this is we just hated to see all the eggs go to one basket when there's so many other areas of need and cuts that really affect community members. This park hasn't existed, so we're not losing anything, but we certainly do have a lot to gain by having something done there. Linda, go ahead.
Well, I have a question. I need clarification. On the projects that City Council has already funded, did that money come out of Major J, or was that out of general fund money? You said that they had picked up some of the projects that were needed to be done, and I'm interested where the money came to do that on the projects that they had approved.
That came from Measure J.
They came out of our
Measure
Measure
J?
J? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make a personal comment. I really agree with several of you, and particularly Naomi. I think we have been appointed to be the safeguards of this funding so that there's not knee-jerk projects that are coming to us, that we are really looking at things that have been studied and clarified and defended. And we are in a really, really serious time right now. And I would hope that we keep in mind our public parks and the work that that commission has done. You've sent them back several times to review their needs and prioritize. They did that work really with a lot of their time. And so I support as much of those that we can possibly finance to be done. In my opinion, a longtime citizen, that's where the people go. It's great to have a beautiful thing downtown, and I know the business people need that, and it would be a disaster to have another pile of dirt to look at for 5 years, that would be awful. So I support us being very conservative in what we do offer for the downtown park. But my heart and soul is really with Parks and Rec. Their money has been removed often, and all of us probably here use all of those facilities, and those are old, old, old buildings. And so that is my say. And I do thank you for having this meeting today. There's a lot of new information that's come forward. So thank you, city staff, and to you, Chair Kazan, and all of you.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
I said go first, sorry.
Sid?
I just wanted to say that listening to everything that's being said, and I was the chairman of Parks and Recreation and resigned as chairman because I wanted to be on Measure J. And I was interviewed to be on Measure J because I said I wanted to be involved in how that 1% was being spent and how it was being recommended to what's going on. I think under the circumstances that we're dealing with a pandemic, which is the worst since 103 years ago, that if the council cannot go back to Rios and say, we need for you to come up with a version of this, what we can live with, what we can deal with, and it has to come down in price under the circumstances. I mean, it's not an act of God, but it's the attitude of we're in a very, very tough situation. We're in uncharted territory. And to have our cake and eat it too, I think that a company like Rios, who came with high recommendations, made huge presentations to the city why they should be the one that was hired, I think that they can do what we're requesting. I don't think this is like trying to create something new that's never been done before. And I really hope that our recommendation to the council would be in that area as well, of telling this company, this is what we need, and what can you do to make this happen? I don't want to lose other things. I don't want to lose a bathroom out in Desert Highlands so people can't have a place to go on the weekends because of a water fountain, because of us completing a water treatment in the downtown park. These are the things that I object to as being part of Measure J. That's my feeling, that's my opinion, but I see the way money is spent over the years, and I just look at it that this is something that our voice, Measure J, should be very strong to the city council. We were there in the beginning. We were in those meetings, as you talked about, Jim, in 1914, 1950, when Chris Mills was on the council, Pugnier was still the mayor. I was in those meetings being part of Measure J, and I think this can be done. I think this company has a responsibility to us. The times have changed. This is nothing like we thought. And I just feel that they're not looking at it that way. That's what scares me a little, that they keep talking about we need to complete because of the money that's being spent. Well, I'm asking them to pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Jeffrey.
So if you look at what happened at in June when the city council staff came up with an option that said complete, and this is on page 3 of what Don just shared, complete a modified or interim downtown park that would include the police station and restroom building. It would have a limited desert landscape with lawn area, complete the parking lot repairs, and that would still save the $3 million. It would take $4.3 million from Quimby and $2 million from Measure J. And to me, that means that if there's additional funds that do come from, and it's not just other savings, I think TOT from vacation rentals has been higher than anticipated, and there's some other grants. And if there is funds available, that we then meet again with the Parks and Rec to redirect those funds to other community parks, and we can work, I would want to work with them to prioritize, because I don't think we'll be able to cover everything, how that gets spent, and whether it's the dog park or these restrooms. But I would say if we have my motion would be go with the option 2 for the completing a modified downtown park, and if additional funds become available, that we meet with Parks and Rec to direct them to community parks.
I second.
Uh,
Yes.
Okay, quick.
Jeffrey?
So we have a motion, and Dan, I'll let
I'd
you.
like, yeah. I'm just wondering, we've kind of gone, first of all, I agree with the first part of that, Jeffrey. The second part, we've got this list that we've been back and forth with the Parks Commission of these 8 things that total 925,000. I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to the second part of your motion to direct them towards those. They're widely spread out amongst the parks. The shade structures are extremely important. These bathrooms at James O'Jesse, I think that just screams out to be done. And I think if we gave them a more directed suggestion about where to go, I don't think Parks and Rec would push back on any of those things.
I accept your friendly amendment.
For the sake of time, I like the original motion, and that we get with Parks, that list of 925,000. I don't read anywhere that was approved by council. That was, and Joel, Joel, can you verify? That was on the final page of one of your attachments. It was the,
I think that was the original, like, pre-COVID project list, right? Is that what we're talking about? And the question is, do we want
it wasn't
to?
the one that first came to us, but I don't think it's been approved by council.
The list, yeah, you're right. The list that was provided was going to go to council in March or April, and then everything kind of been put on.
Right. The whole commission was gearing up to present those 9 things to council as the next $1 million project.
But what was approved in January by council? Where is it? They did approve things in January 2020 that have to do with the Demuth and then Sunrise Plaza. A lot of it wasn't anything really sexy, but it was a lot of window replacement, HVAC work that needed to be done.
One thing to note Jim, one thing to note is that money was actually pulled from capital fund, not from Measure J. I think the point there was that the council was using other funds as well to address issues within the park but weren't really using Measure J.
So can I revise my motion then to say I move that we go to support the option 2, which is completing a scaled down. We recommend completing the scaled down version of the downtown park, and our priority list, should funds come back, would be this 925,000 to be reconfirmed with Parks and Rec in case something else has come up.
Second.
Does that make sense? Dan, does that address?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because things like the dog park were not even in consideration at that point.
Can I interrupt that for a quick question to Dom or Joel? In option 2 and option 3 is the 1.1 million to complete the substation and the restrooms. Is that line item automatically necessary to bring the project to grade? Or in other words, could that line simply be scratched and done later without wasting money?
That item does need to be done. It's almost independent of the park. Well, not independent. It needs to happen. The structure needs those repairs.
Okay.
That money needs to be spent, and that structure needs to be repaired.
Thanks for the detour and the information. Back to Jeff.
I just have one question about this 925K of the kind of priority projects. We are not saying that this is in order of Measure J priorities. It's just the priorities that we have already all agreed. I think we should make that very clear to council.
They can pick and choose.
Yeah, well, right now we've spoken a lot about the restrooms at James O'Jesse, and it's the last on the list, so I don't want them to think that that's like the last of our priorities. And then my other comment would be around that we would defer to Parks and Rec about which projects of these 8 should be kind of what their timeline or priority list is. Like, we're comfortable with any of these 8, and Parks and Rec can decide which ones to move forward with. That's what we're saying, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
I think we're all in agreement. All right.
There's a second. Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Aye.
7 ayes. Any opposed? No. Okay. Great. Well, guys, I need to catch a flight and get back to the heat.
Well, thanks
Sure,
everybody for
it's
getting
so hot
together. I
this
think this
week.
was really helpful.
I know, I want to stay here. It's like 72 and pleasant. Well, it's great seeing everybody. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda. I will get a recommendation created, and we'll get that to staff, and then also sent to each council member. And we can tune in and watch their Zoom session on Thursday.
Can I just mention 2 things? There is the option for anyone to make public comment at the meeting.
Yes.
I think it is, we're going to have an official Measure J recommendation, but if somebody else has other things, I think, you can always add that. Can I also ask that we get copied on the written, if there's a written recommendation, that the whole commission be copied on that so we have a record of it?
Yes, I'll make sure that everything goes to Chantel, and then she can get it out to everybody, just so I stay within Brown Act guidelines. And again, if something else comes up, we will definitely schedule another meeting prior to September 24th if need be.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing you in person soon.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.